This is Palytoxin, and it's considered to be one of the most potent non-protein toxins in the world, second to Palytoxin, which I have talked about on here before. So it's not the most potent toxin in the world, but most of the other toxins are protein, at least protein-based. This one is not. It's mainly produced by corals and dinoflagellate microorganisms. However, it's not entirely known in corals that if it's the corals themselves that produce it or if it's a symbiotic relationship with other bacteria that produce it. However, it is still found in these corals and occasionally in other marine organisms such as fish or like mussels or oysters, but that's not being produced by those other organisms. It's due to biomagnification, where those organisms eat something like the coral or the dinoflagellates and then accumulate that toxin in them. And it's not produced on their own, it's obtained throughout the diet. That's similar to what pesticides do in some cases. It is a very, very potent toxin with an LD50 or lethal dose of between 2 and 30 micrograms. Now that is a pretty decently large range. It does depend on the individual. But on larger organisms, the microgram dose is still very, very small, so it's very, very potent. Now, it works by binding onto the same receptors that wildbane bonds to, which I have talked before about in milkweed. So what Palytoxin does, it binds to the sodium-potassium ATPase, which is a sodium-potassium pump that works to establish an ion gradient between the outside and the inside of the cell. Now, when this toxin binds, it kind of locks the pump in an open conformation and thus disrupts the flow of the gradient of ions through the cell, and when the gradient is disrupted, then a whole lot of things happen, and basically it just results in your cells dying. Now, this has a couple different effects and symptoms. Largely, it's a vasoconstrictor, which means it makes your blood vessels kind of tighten up, which is not good for blood flow. It's also hemolytic, which means it basically explodes your blood cells, which is not good for your blood cells. Your blood cells do not want to be exploded. Other symptoms include things like chest pain and trouble breathing and tachycardia, which basically means a very, very fast heart rate as well as a fast and or irregular blood pressure. Now, the most common result of this is breakdown of skeletal muscles, where your muscles just kind of dissolve, I guess. But the main cause of death of this is through heart failure or cardiac arrest, because it just doesn't work anymore. Currently, there's no antidote for this. It has been shown that vasodilators are somewhat effective if applied right soon after poisoning, basically to counteract the vasoconstriction of the toxin. However, poisoning is very, very rare from this because people aren't really interacting with organisms that have it that much. The only real cases of poisonings have come from accidentally ingesting contaminated seafood. Again, that was pretty uncommon and most of the time not fatal. It's very rare cases. Most of the other ones come from handling the coral that produce it. Namely, these guys, the Palythoa corals. They're a pretty popular aquarium coral, and so sometimes people get accidentally poisoned by these when handling them without gloves or when moving them. It's through either skin contact or inhalation. Again, when handling with them without gloves, sometimes skin contact can cause poisoning, or if they're trying to remove them and they accidentally damage the coral, it can be released into the air and then cause poisoning through inhalation. But again, this is very, very rare, so not really a toxin you really have to worry about.